Good evening and welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Maayan Hoffman, Executive Editor of ILTV News. President Donald Trump has landed in Saudi Arabia in what his team is calling an economic mission. But behind the trillion-dollar deals and red carpet receptions, there are serious questions about what this visit really means for Israel, for the region, and for U.S. foreign policy. Trump is skipping Israel entirely. He's reportedly softened his demand for Saudi-Israel normalization, and he's accepting a private jet from Qatar, sparking controversy. At the same time, he's holding quiet talks with Arab leaders about Gaza and possibly even Syria. So where does this leave Israel? Is Washington still aligned with Jerusalem, or are we seeing a shift toward a more transactional, Gulf-centered diplomacy? Joining me today to unpack the moment are two seasoned Mideast experts, Dan Diker and former Ambassador Daniel Shek. Let's get started. So first of all, U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in Saudi Arabia today. He has touted the visit to the region as mostly economic. Why do you think the president is really in Saudi Arabia? Is it business, diplomacy, legacy building? Dan, why don't you start?
Maayan, it's all three. It's business, legacy building, and diplomacy. President Trump, as is well known to the world, is an economic warrior. His power projection, as the White House spokesman said just yesterday, it fashions cultural exchange, trade, and commerce as the ultimate power projection of the United States, and that, in their view, will defeat ideological enemies of the United States and of its ally Israel. Now, well, we can talk about we can talk about that, but from Trump's point of view, he's come to secure up to $3 trillion in trade deals from the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, and he's already got hundreds of billions of dollars of guaranteed sales in his pocket. When he landed earlier today in Riyadh. So this is the classic Donald Trump. This is the art of the Middle East deal, and this is potentially the biggest mega deal the world has ever seen coming out of the Middle East. And he has a very willing partner in Mohammed bin Salman, who shares a vision, what's called the 2030 vision. He shares that vision with Trump. And they both see the Middle East as a potential global center for commerce, trade, and power.
So while that's all lovely, the truth of the matter is Saudi Arabia has not actually committed to the amount of dollars that Trump is asking. But let's say he does get that deal or somewhere near that deal. Would making such a deal with Saudi Arabia, would the money make up for his decision to skip visiting Jerusalem on this trip? What kind of message does it send to the world that Trump comes to the region but doesn't come to Israel? Daniel, why don't you take that one?
Well, I think the message is clear. We're not a priority because I agree with Dan. It's all three motivations, but in that order. And the top priority is business. And business-wise, Israel is of absolutely no interest. So what does that mean about the two other priorities? Or especially, personally, I regard the middle one, the diplomacy one, as the most crucial for Israel. I think that if things go well and the Saudis and the Qataris are game, he will advance the diplomatic agenda. He might do so without really consulting Israel, as he has been doing in the last few weeks on a number of issues. But he's a very unpredictable personality, and we'll have to just see hour by hour how these things evolve. I can tell you that I just came out of parts of a meeting between family members of hostages and Steve Witkoff and Adam Boehler. They spent 2 hours with them trying to make sure that they are convinced that President Trump and the U.S. are committed to reaching an overreaching hostage deal, and that would mean the end of the war.
Well, and there is no doubt that U.S. President Donald Trump is a very good and strong friend of Israel and certainly on Israel's side. But there have been rumors in the recent days about some daylight being formed between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Do you think that the president's transactional diplomacy could actually make him less of a reliable ally this term than he was last? Dan.
Maayan, President Trump has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt his friendship, support for the state of Israel. He's done more than any other U.S. president to advance Israel's vital interests, its national security interests, its defense, military, and international legitimacy as well. It's clear also, let's be very clear. In 2025, Prime Minister Netanyahu was the first foreign leader to visit the White House. Within weeks, he was re-invited to the White House. President Trump drew a line in the sand for the international community that through his actions and his very pro-Israel statements in both of those meetings. I'm not surprised that he has made this a Gulf first mission for himself. I don't think it means that Israel is unimportant. I think it means he's pursuing a different strategy. He's pursuing what I would call an Abraham Accords or an Abraham Alliance strategy with the major Gulf powers first to leverage up the United States' position and then to sort of parlay that into diplomatic profits that Israel will profit from. There is a point of collision here on the way to a shared Israeli-U.S. goal, and I would even say a shared U.S. Israeli-Saudi goal, which is normalization. Saudi wants normalization with Israel. It's very clear. I've been in meetings where Israeli technology and other assets have come up with stakeholders in the Middle East. There is a difference between the U.S. and Israeli tactical approach to how to bring peace in Gaza, get the hostages back. We know that Saudi wants a quiet Gaza now in order to pursue this sort of Trump MBS mega vision for the region that ultimately Israel will want also. But the main problem is, and I'll finish with this, is that Israel faces an evil, cruel, radical Islamic enemy that rapes and tortures and kidnaps its neighbors. And there's really an issue here that if Israel stops the war, we will not get all the hostages back, in most likely opposite Hamas. And if we leave Hamas in power, we have a major Iranian proxy that will trigger violence across the region and even across the world.
So, Dan, I want to keep going with this.
Here.
Okay, Dan, go ahead, please.
I have to disagree here. I have to disagree with nearly everything that you said, Dan. First of all, reliable is certainly not an adjective that I would use for Donald Trump. What you described was true a month or two ago. I absolutely agree, but that doesn't mean that it's still true today. Things change, and I think today Israel is not the priority. I also think that normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which was on the table, absolutely, and maybe still is, but it's no longer a prerequisite for this mega deal that Donald Trump is going to do with Saudi Arabia. And without the American conditioning on that deal, saying that we won't do this deal unless you do normalization with Israel, there will be no normalization with Israel, because the high tech and the technology and the stuff they get without normalization. They don't need political normalization with Israel for that. And I'll add that will be one of the most wasted opportunities for the state of Israel ever. So I think things are different. I also don't think that military pressure has had any kind of impact on freeing the hostages. 14 months of military pressure have done nothing until one phone call from Donald Trump came to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and then suddenly 33 hostages came back. And that is exactly what is going to happen for the next batch, and I hope as soon as possible.
Dan, do you want to respond?
I wonder whether Ambassador Shek would be in favor of Hamas or believes that Hamas will remain in power in Gaza.
I've seen no project for the post-war reality, not from Europe, not from the UAE, not from Egypt, not from the US. Nobody proposes to leave Hamas in power. The only thing, my friend, that leaves Hamas in power is Israel's refusal to talk about the day after, because it leaves a void, and that void is filled naturally by Hamas.
And let me ask you this. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead. You can respond quickly, but I want to move on to another question.
I think Israel has subscribed to what was the Trump vision just weeks ago, which is what they call the Gaza Riviera, which is actually a realistic plan, certainly from Gaza's point of view. Danny, if you look at Daniel, just look at the numbers. The Palestinian polling numbers show that the vast majority of Gazans would relocate in a minute if they had a plane ticket, a destination, and a grant.
Dream on, my friend. Dream on. So 1 million will leave, and what will you do with the other million?
So the majority of Gazans
they will work on the golf course. That's the plan.
What will have to happen, I think you know this very well, due to the abject failure of the Oslo process, which was the whole conception that led to October 7th, that Gaza will no longer be a direct existential strategic threat to Israel, and that will mean, by definition, the way the Americans destroyed ISIS and Al Qaeda after 9/11, Israel will do the same in Gaza. We have a disease in Israel, and it's called the day after disease, where people think that you can create a day after scenario before radical Islamic enemies who see this as a long war over decades and centuries are defeated.
Well, let me say this, Dan. I need to move on, but the truth of the matter is that, Dan, what you're leading to is actually not necessarily at this stage correct, because as we mentioned, Trump is in Saudi Arabia, and he's not just meeting with the Saudis. He's actually going to be meeting with representatives from Lebanon and from Syria and from even the Palestinian Authority. There is a possibility that the president could unveil a more developed U.S. plan for post-war Gaza governance, and it is even likely. Daniel, if he does so, is it a plan that you believe that Israel will then be able to get behind, a plan that maybe looks different than the initial, let's call it, idea that Trump put out there that the Gazans would be relocated? Do you think the Arab world would support such a plan?
Relocating the Palestinians?
No, the opposite. I'm saying not relocating the Palestinians. That was the original idea, but Trump is likely to unveil something different.
I think that the general feeling in the international community, and there's going to be a conference of over 100 countries in Paris in mid-June about this, is to stabilize the region. And stabilize the region means not just pacifying the border between Gaza and the Gaza envelope. That obviously is crucial and a prerequisite. But it cannot happen without some kind of Israeli-Palestinian arrangement. I'm not saying exactly what, and certainly not in one step. And that arrangement can only have a chance of survival if there is a regional stabilizing atmosphere. And that, I think, is the general project, which could reestablish an international community that cooperates transatlantically. There is daylight, a lot of daylight between the US and Europe right now. But I think that stabilizing Lebanon, stabilizing Syria, stabilizing Israeli-Arab relations brings them to a common ground that might result in something big. And I hope it will. It's not just a question of 58 hostages remaining or thousands of Palestinians that die every month. It's not only that. There is a real future for this region. And the only way that this future of prosperity that you so nicely described, Dan, can survive is not through erasing Gaza and sending everybody home, to another country. That is not the solution. The solution is long-term stability in this region. And that, I think, is what President Trump is seeking. And suddenly, the impatient Trump is turning out to be more efficient than the endlessly patient Joe Biden that the Israeli right so much hated.
Now, do you believe, you mentioned before, Daniel, that Trump has actually taken normalization with Israel as a prerequisite for this mega, deal, and even for the potential support of the Saudi Arabian civilian nuclear program. Dan, can you tell me, do you think that it is possible to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia without a Palestinian state? Because Saudi Arabia has not yet taken that precondition off the table when it comes to normalization.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation regarding the so-called Saudi demand for a Palestinian state. I mean, I've been in talks with people in Saudi Arabia myself, and their point is that there's a fundamental difference between the Arab street. Let's face it, Saudi Arabia is the king, is the leader of the Arab Muslim world. And they have to listen to what the street is saying. The street is unabashedly and completely totally with the Palestinians, and therefore the regimes also have to be sensitive to public opinion, even though they're not democracies. So this talk about a path, we've heard Mohammed bin Salman say that he wants a pathway to a Palestinian state. He doesn't want a Palestinian state. A lot of this is lip service to pay to his many times arrested publics. What he really wants is civil nuclear capability from the United States and some sort of and quiet on the Gaza front. That's clear. And I agree with what Ambassador Shek said. What Daniel said is very right. This is the context of a major, potentially more stable, more prosperous, more secure Middle East. And that is the strategy both of MBS and of President Trump. They align on this point, and the region has never been in such a position, notwithstanding the problem of the Iranian regime and its race for nuclear supremacy right now. But notwithstanding that, there is a major potential here for a much more secure, stable, and prosperous region. And clearly, we have to have quiet. We have to have quiet on the Palestinian fronts in order to do that. We still have major challenges in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, with Iranian agents and Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So there's a lot of quieting that has to take place in order to achieve the regional vision. But I don't think that Saudi Arabia ultimately will abandon the idea of normalization with Israel until there's a Palestinian state, because in Israel there's absolutely no public support for another terror-supporting Palestinian state. That letter is a dead letter, and we have to figure out other ways.
Let me stop you, Dan, for a minute, because I actually think we need to then look at Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the influence that these two countries are having on Donald Trump. Daniel, do you agree that if Saudi Arabia will not withdraw this, that we will not be able to then move forward with normalization? How influential do you think these two countries are on the president, and what impact will that then have on Israel?
I have to say again, I don't think that there is a real Saudi motivation to push for normalization with Israel. I think that there was a serious discussion about it because the U.S. administration under Biden, by the way, when the talks began about the agreements between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. that go beyond just business. There's also an issue of nuclear facilities and an issue of mutual defense and all sorts of other things. It was the American administration that said that if you want to move forward and if you want this to go through Congress, then you need to include normalization with Israel. So if Donald Trump as president no longer requires that, and I don't know that to be the fact, but it sort of seems that way, then I don't think that Saudi Arabia will be the one to push towards it. And that will mean that Israel has missed a chance for a real game changer because, as Dan says, Saudi Arabia is the leader in the Arab world today, certainly in what could be considered the more moderate Arab world. And to miss an opportunity of such normalization simply because Israel refuses to end a war that is going nowhere for the minute, we're turning in circles in Gaza, that would be really a serious waste.
So, Dan, final, sentiments here. Can you respond to that? Do you think we've actually missed this opportunity? And is there any way to get it back? A very short answer, please.
No, I think we still have the opportunity. It's right now in limbo, but the opportunity is there. In the Middle East, remember, the Middle East operates according to Donald Trump's thinking, which is entrepreneurialism, which is bizarrism, which is the reality of the moment. And at this moment, it's a very complex moment. I fully agree with Daniel's sentiments on that point. I don't think we've missed it. it's very clear. We must get the hostages back ASAP, and we must come to some understanding, regarding Israel's role in the region. But we cannot leave Hamas in power. It's impossible. If that happens, we will see a spate of waves of violence sweeping through the Middle East and the rest of the international community, because the extremists on the Islamic side will see that the West has lost.
Daniel, final sentence. What do you want to respond?
Yeah, you see the images behind me. That is my priority. That is the priority of 70% of the Israeli public, including 40% of voters who voted for this government. And I can only hope that the release of Idan Alexander, that was done without Israel, I remind you, will be a door opening and not a door slamming shut, meaning that it will be the beginning of a process that will bring all 58 remaining hostages home as soon as possible.
And on that sentiment, we are going to have to conclude tonight. Amen to that. Let's bring all of our hostages home. Thank you so much to our guests, Dan Diker and Daniel Shek. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching Insider. Have a safe and pleasant evening.